This building is what used to be the Westminster Palace Hotel, the site of which the Women's National Anti-Suffrage League had their first meeting in July 1908. The League's aims were to oppose women being granted the parliamentary franchise, but it did support women voting in local and municipal elections. Spoiler, they did not achieve their goal. Us pesky little females can now get our grubby little mitts on the ballot.
It's political correctness gone mad.
Now, you might be thinking, why wouldn't they want the vote? It's fun. They'd miss out on all the dogs at polling stations. Well, some of their reasons were actually quite interesting. More interesting than them being mere pick-me's vintage edition. But before I get into that, let me introduce myself. My name is Tara Mooney, and this is the only channel on YouTube where all videos are written and produced by a cow. She couldn't be in the video today because she's actually voting in her local bovine council elections, which, funnily enough, the anti-suffragists would have been fine with. I can't vote in those because I'm not a cow.
I'm not the cow, okay?
So let's throw that conspiracy out of the window. But if you like and subscribe, she might appear in the next one. Today, I will be focusing on the women who fought against the rights that I enjoy today. But as it is International Women's Day, I do want to give a quick shout out to the Equal Franchise Act of 1928, which allowed women over 21 to vote. There was also the Representation of the People Act in 1918, but we don't count that because it was only for women over 30 who met certain property requirements, which is lame and not based, and I wouldn't have qualified, so we don't count it because it's my channel, so it's about me. So there. So yeah, thanks to the Equal Franchise Act, I have the right to vote, the right to spoil my ballot, and the right to make a smooth transition into my sponsor segment. Heyo! The other day, I was Googling myself and the cow, and you'll never guess what I found. A satellite image of the exact location of the cow's editing quarters. I have been trying my darndest to hide her location, but you pesky little beavers keep getting closer and closer. To rectify this, I have swiftly relocated her to a new office space. Phew! That was a close call. On a serious note, I did Google myself and my family members, and it's quite spooky what came up. Most of it is innocuous stuff like where you went to school and worked, etc, etc. But it does make me wonder how much more information people can find with just a bit of Googling. In some cases, people can find your email address, where you go to the gym, and even your home address. Eek! The reason this information is accessible is because of data brokers who profit from selling your information to robocallers, telemarketers, and spammers. But I have something that can help you with that, and that is today's sponsor, Aura. Aura will identify data brokers who are exposing your information and automatically submits opt-out requests on your behalf. It opts you out of junk mail and telemarketing lists. Aura also monitors your emails and passwords to see if they were involved in a data breach and if they've been exposed on the dark web, and it gives you recommendations on what to do. Aura's app also features a VPN, password manager, real-time credit and identity theft monitoring, internet parental controls, and protects your devices from malware. I mean, what can't it do? I mean, it can't make your dad come home. But yeah, all of this in just one app. Staying safe online shouldn't require tons of constant and grueling work. So use protection by using Aura. If you sign up right now, Aura will give you a free 2-week trial with my link. You will be shocked to find out how much of your information Aura will find exposed over those 2 weeks. But then after the shock, you will be relieved that you have Aura. Go to aura.com/Tara for your free trial. Also linked below in the description, or scan the QR code. Thank you, Aura, for keeping me safe, and thank you in advance for keeping my little subscription safe. According to American suffragist Carrie Chapman Catt, the enemy to suffrage was not men, but resistance to change. I mean, it was also men. They didn't help matters. Funnily enough, I found an archived article in The Atlantic from September 1903 called Why Women Do Not Wish the Suffrage by a man called Linman Abbott. Who needs a woman to write it when Linman can just tell you what women want? Briefly, I believe it is because woman feels, if she does not clearly see, that the question of woman's suffrage is more than merely political, that it concerns the nature and structure of society, the home, the church, the industrial organism, the state, the social fabric. In short, he argued that for women to vote and take part in political office would be against their nature. They'd be imitating men and therefore bastardizing womanhood because of God and motherhood and stuff like that. And to a change which involves a revolution in all these, she interposes an inflexible, though generally a silent opposition. It is for these silent women, whose voices are not heard in conventions, who write no leaders, deliver no lectures, and visit no legislative assemblies, that I speak. It is their unspoken thought and feeling I wish to interpret. He's speaking up for women, like a true ally. Bless up, Linman. Going back to Carrie Chapman Catt, she was onto something. Much like today's fight against bodily autonomy, there was a cohort of women resisting women gaining the vote. It was a classical conservative movement that sought to keep the status quo, for the most part. But I'm more interested in the women who were walking contradictions. Those who were outspoken, educated, high status, yet still opposed suffrage. Funnily enough, Carrie Chapman Catt initially opposed it. When Congressman Frank Clark of Florida proposed a national referendum for women in 1918, she exclaimed the idea was unconstitutional and pointless. But thankfully, she changed her mind. Same goes for Susan B. Anthony, or Anthony. How do you Americans say it? Anyway, she opposed it in Washington State in 1871, claiming that women's condition of servitude made them unable to see the issue clearly. Now, it is also worth noting that she also changed her mind, but for white women. Ew. Good rule of thumb is to assume that pretty much everyone involved here was racist. The suffragettes were racist, the suffragists were racist, the anti-suffragists were racist. Just wanted to put that out there in case your school is not allowed to say that their historical faves were racist. Now, back to the question of this video. Why would educated women oppose their own suffrage? Anti-suffragists included the likes of Caroline Corbin of Illinois, who co-founded the Association for Advancement of Women and became the president of the Illinois Antis. Agnes Irwin, the first dean of Radcliffe College. Mrs. J.B. Lippincott, who promoted scholarships for women, but then became the leader of the Los Angeles Antis. And Annie Nathan Meyer, a founder of Barnard College, who remained so even up until her death in 1951, so big L for Annie. The female leaders of the US anti-suffrage campaign were generally women of wealth, privilege, social status, and even political power. They were the women who were doing well, comparatively, in this current system. So they had incentive to cling onto a system that privileged them. Opening the vote to women could mean the wrong kind of women getting the vote, i.e., women of colour, socialists, and prostitutes. In 1918, the women's protest had been renamed the Woman Patriot and dedicated itself to the defense of womanhood, motherhood, the family, and the state against suffragism, feminism, and socialism. Where do I sign up? They feared that prostitutes would be much more likely to vote than other women, in order to keep corrupt local politicians in office and protect their own livelihood, God forbid. As a result, the antis kept bringing up the issue of vicious women voters in congressional hearings, and one minister said, "We cannot afford to let this element vote. Respectable women already had influence over lawmakers. There was an overarching cynicism in political systems. The idea was women uniting for the common good, rather than dividing along party lines, as men did. So this was a major theme for the antis, the idea that women were non-partisan. Men's political activity involved dirty deals, personal attacks, bribery, and corruption. Respectable, married women held the moral high ground, while politicians occupied the moral low ground. So it wasn't as simple as just women should stay in the kitchen. Don't get me wrong, it's still sexist because it was reinforcing the theory of complementarianism. Women were equal, but different. Their role was caring for the local community. And as previously mentioned, members of the Women's National Anti-Suffrage League in London in 1908 were all for women participating in local elections, just not parliamentary ones. For a small minority of anti-suffragists, you could argue that they were approaching the issue from a more progressive standpoint, like anarchist Emma Goldman, who saw the electoral system as a tool of the powerful, and Beatrice Webb, a founder of the London School of Economics, who was an early advocate for the welfare state. In 1889, she signed a petition against women's suffrage in Britain, believing that economic emancipation was more important than the right to vote. She later changed her mind and campaigned for equal pay and women in academia. And, I can kind of sympathise with this standpoint. I feel like it's parallel with, today's fraction of people who opt out of voting for political reasons, as a form of protest against the corrupt system. However, I don't think those people would say, because I don't want to vote, let's not bother even having the right to vote. Like, they still have the choice, and I think they're still for the choice. But anyways, so many of these aforementioned women did change their minds, even those who opposed suffrage for conservative reasons. Once the 19th Amendment in the USA was passed, many of the women who opposed this exercised that right, many of whom took the energy they were investing into the anti-suffrage campaign, then took it to the Republican Party. Former members of anti-suffrage groups in New York became involved in the Women's National Republican Club. Former anti-suffragist Ida Tarbell expressed that it would take some time for women to get comfortable with voting, but it's safe to say that, at least in the US, they have. So comfortable that they gleefully take it for granted. And that brings me on to today, 2023. The modern day. Are they just pick-me's? Spoiler, nope. So what about women in this day and age that espouse that women shouldn't have the right to vote? That's even more peculiar than the anti-suffragists. In my opinion, anyway. They were facing the uncertainty of the future. Progress can be scary when it's the unknown. But what about people who want to reverse progress? They're a fascinating species, aren't they? Because we've got the right now, so what they're advocating for is taking it away? Personally, I am for women keeping the right to vote. If you've got the right to vote, to take it away would take a lot of unnecessary faff. And as I've said, I love seeing dogs at polling stations. So what's happening here? Are they just being pick-me's, begging for ultra-conservative men to accept them?
I think of women back then not being able to vote and having the whole one house, one vote thing. Why would you marry a man who wouldn't vote in your best interest or you wouldn't agree with politically to begin with?
Teehee. They're not like the other girls. They're so low maintenance, they don't even need rights.
The 26th Amendment to the US Constitution was passed by Richard Nixon in 1971. It lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. It was passed right at the end of the Vietnam War. The average age of a combat soldier was 19. That should have instantly triggered the 19th Amendment. Women are not drafted. Women do not pay a blood price. Women don't pay taxes. 1-year-olds who have trust funds, they also have to pay tax. Do they get to vote?
Yeah, but they're not, but that's a 1-year-old.
I think this is rare. The women who genuinely believe this are so lost in the alt-right conservative trad wife, trad Kath's source that they're drowning in Stockholm Syndrome. But to say that this applies to all women who espouse this talking point is too black and white for my liking. So I have split these women into two strands. Those who are for real and those who are not for real. The ladies who genuinely believe in this have two subsections. The first, as I just mentioned, are those experiencing Stockholm Syndrome. The second are women in the alt-right looking to achieve their extremist conservative utopia.
Gibbs is a former Trump administration official who in the early 2000s ran this think tank called the Society for the Critique of Feminism. And it basically argued several things, one of which was that the US has greatly suffered from women having the right to vote, that women did not possess the necessary qualities to govern, and that women should not be allowed to be in the workplace, basically.
In the US, women do typically vote for Democratic candidates more than men do. Now, this gets a bit more dicey when you break down women into class, education level, and race. But there is truth in that. In general, women do tend to vote more liberal than men.
Abortion is becoming the issue that's driving turnout. Last night, exit polls, you guys talked about it earlier, Democrats win independents in a non-presidential year, and it was because these women just went crazy.
Darn women. So I can see the logic. If you want your Republican, conservative, unseasoned, white bread utopia, removing women as voters could help. That being said, women are no monolith. Women who are white and conservative are more likely to vote Republican.
It was women that got Trump elected.
In fact, if you compare white women voters voting Republican to black women voters in recent elections, holy smokes, the difference is staggering. I do not support all women. Some of you bitches are very dumb. Why would you alienate a significant proportion of your voter base by saying that they shouldn't be able to vote? That seems counterintuitive, right? Here's my thing. They know that ain't gonna happen. They need women to bulk up their numbers. 'Cause women turn out to vote more than men. It's a fake talking point. This brings me onto the second category. Those who are not for real. A very academic title, I know. I think most of the people, i.e. reactionaries, who make this argument know that what they're saying is ridiculous. They know full well that this is an unachievable goal. In countries where women have had the right to vote for a very long time and are in government and blah 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 blah. But yeah, they don't genuinely believe it. We live in an age now that in order to win in conservative politics, you've got to be even more over the top and provocative as your predecessor and or rival. And this brings me onto the first subcategory, reactionaries who want to trigger the libs.
Personally, and this is where people take me out of context and say I don't think women should vote. Personally, if I, in 2022, had the choice where I had to go fight in the front lines just like the men in a war, or I could give up my right to vote, I would give up my right to vote. And that's what happened back then, is they equated voting with
says the 19th Amendment led the whole U.S. government to increase in size, adding, we conclude that the U.S. has suffered as a result of women's suffrage. Now, on a few other occasions as well, he also praised an organization that was actively trying to repeal the 19th Amendment. His own website that he maintained called this organization great. He even wrote them an email that they then posted on their website in the early 2000s that said, "You have my support." So we reached out to the Gibbs campaign yesterday. They told us that he made this website to provoke the left.
I.e., setting a goal that you know you can never achieve and living it out because you enjoy the fight. It's simply more fodder for the chuds to clap like seals. Honestly, letting women vote in this country wasn't one of the best ideas. Females vote with emotion and overwhelmingly support democratic feel-good policies that take away our actual rights. I'd rather lose my right to vote than lose my right to defend myself with a firearm. Lots of emotional responses to this tweet. As always, thanks for proving my point, everyone. Now, this subcategory does have some crossover with the second subcategory. which I'll call recruiters. Saying inflammatory things like, women shouldn't have the right to vote, makes you stand out, and it's a tasty morsel to attract a reactionary audience.
Huh?
I don't think women should vote.
Lord Jesus, keep on going.
Yeah, that's
No
it.
women, you can't vote. No birth control. Keep it going.
No, because it's always freedom without responsibility. And
I
so,
love
like,
it.
the
Women
reason
should not
No,
vote.
but-
Pearlie
but
said it
I'll
herself.
tell you why, though. I'll tell you why. Because there's freedom without responsibility. Like, I believe in consequences for your decision. So the men know if they vote someone batshit crazy into power, you guys get drafted.
Although
We
that was
don't.
funny. The girl who was like, I'd rather lose my right to vote than my right to bear arms. If I had to choose, she's not wrong.
They know what they're doing. They're just projecting onto the big screen, singing their greatest hits to their audience. Like ABBA Voyage, but shitter. So, I have asserted that women's suffrage isn't under any serious threat, at least in places like the US and the UK, my primary audience on YouTube. It's important to bear in mind that in some places, the right for women to vote is relatively new, and also, having the legal right to vote does not necessarily mean that voting in practice is realistic, even in the US and the UK. Voter repression materializes in insidious ways, like ID requirements, lack of accessibility to polling stations, not accommodating people who speak different languages, having police present, etc., etc. International initiatives like the United Nations Programme on Women's Political Participation focus on removing barriers so women can vote. These barriers are a lot more complicated than just, do women have the right to vote? Because apart from the Vatican City, technically every country in the world grants women the right to vote. However, issues like illiteracy suppress women's votes. Nearly 2/3 of the world's illiterate adults are women. Women in traditionally male-dominated societies are less likely to have IDs than men. And even if they do have an ID, it might be carried by their husband, who can withhold it, thereby preventing them from voting. And then there's childcare responsibilities that prevent women from leaving the home, just to name a few. When I say that the vote isn't going anywhere in places like the US and the UK, it's because even the most bonkers Republicans know that it would be disadvantageous for everyone. Now, you might say, but Tara, they repealed Roe v. Wade. Here's the thing. Even though the majority of Americans support Roe v. Wade remaining intact, even in red states, the gender gap in opposing or supporting abortion is narrow. In fact, women are slightly more likely to identify as pro-life than men. I'm currently working on a long-ass video about pro-life feminists, I know, and after attending the annual March for Life rally in London in September, I've come to learn that women make up the majority of this movement, even if it's men primarily making the laws. Anyways, what I'm saying in a roundabout way is that women are crucial in building political movements. Men can't do it alone. And I appreciate that I'm speaking in binary terms here, however, I have yet to come across a pro-life non-binary person, so they're not getting called out today. Perhaps another time. When looking back at the original anti-suffragists, it's safe to say that resistance to change is a key feature of human nature. We can see it in all points of history. So what about women today who spout this talking point in the year of 2023? Well, for the most part, they are just trolling the libs.
And look at the results of having women being able to vote. If it weren't for women getting the right to vote, we would have a way more conservative government. It's the fact that women are very emotional thinkers that leads them to overwhelmingly vote for Democrats. America was much better off before women gained the right to vote, so I say repeal the 19th Amendment, get women back in the kitchen, and if anyone has any store recommendations for where I can get a new apron, please let me know in the comments below. I am dying for a new apron.
So I feel inclined to say, just don't give them the attention. It's a distraction from real issues we could be addressing. That being said, it is important to point out extremism when it's looking you in the face. Ultimately, these people do have platforms. Everyone and their mum has heard of just pearly things now. I can't help but think that debating topics like whether women should have the right to vote, which is a moot point because they already do, is giving legitimacy to the counterpoint that they shouldn't. Personally, I have neither the time nor energy to do so. My patience is very limited. I'm just unable to be in an argument with someone whose primary purpose is to mess with me and to get a rise out of me. I think that's growing up with older brothers. The girlies who know. However, the purpose of disproving reactionaries isn't to get the reactionaries themselves to change their minds, because their livelihood depends on having silly opinions. The benefit is to potentially convert their audience. So if you have the patience to debate someone on this, power to ya. Couldn't be me. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to watch, and let me know your thoughts on this. I'm in two minds on how to deal with people who spout these talking points, so please share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, because one like equals one vote for a woman, and that will trigger the chuds. So woo! And make sure to check out Aura. Right, bye-bye. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. So that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I would like to take a moment to thank the patrons of this channel. They keep it alive, they keep this content going, and they make sure that Siggy and the cow are fed. So shout out to the patrons. And now it is time for the subscription pet shout out. Today we've got the cutest chick in all the land, and that is Noodles. Noodles is an indoor chicken, and she sleeps in bed with her owner. Siggy sleeps in bed with me. She loves grapes and coffee. She loves grapes and coffee. The chicken drinks coffee. But here she is. Isn't she gorgeous? Look at that. Look at her. Look at her little face. This is her in the bath. This is her after the bath. And this is her after a manicure. Like, this is so cursed. Like, I love it. I said this to my friends. And they were like, sorry, I just need a minute, guys. The cluckies who get it, get it. Tara, if you dislike Noodles, you hate women. And I will leave it on that note. Thank you for the submission, Noodles. We love you. And make sure to give her a round of applause.